It's been 35 years since Link wandered into a cave and an old man gave him a sword. And since then, the Hero of Time has evolved in art, gameplay, and story, and in today's video we're going to be looking at how the art style has evolved over time. So grab your sword, grab your tingle, and let's go on an adventure. So let's go back in time. The original Zelda from 1986 was an incredible breakthrough for gaming. Link had a sword and shield and went up against crazy, massive monsters in a grand open world. Just look at the official artwork from back in the 80s. It's a coming-of-age story of an inspiring hero, overcoming their fears and conquering evil. You can see influences from other 80s classics like Dragon Ball, Ranma, and even earlier Ghibli films like Nausicaa. Part of this direction was solely woven into the limitations of the NES console, and as groundbreaking as Nintendo's box of tricks was, it was limited by a tiny palette. Each sprite was only 8x8 pixels high with a 3-color palette. Much like how Mario was designed with overalls to make his running animation clear, the sprites for Link and baddies around him needed to be kind of simplified to show all these little details. They're almost as big, if not bigger, than our hero. It's so interesting to see how a game's functional design inspires the art and vice versa. And when it came to the sequel, Zelda 2, things were a little bit different because Nintendo decided to go for a side-scrolling approach, which allowed the developers to have more realistic proportions. The hero stands tall, trying to awaken a sleeping princess. Katsuya Terada penned some incredible art that gave the game a rich, fantasy setting. Deep, dark and sprawling dungeons, ferocious beasts and warriors. It's almost got kind of Western quality for the art style, with elements from 80s Marvel comics to artwork from novels like Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic. And it even feels kind of like early Final Fantasy work from renowned artist Yoshitaka Amano in a lot of ways. And what's interesting about the early Zelda games is how the functional design and the gameplay really came first, with the artwork only really supplementing the game, kind of like how you have sketches in a novel, for example. Much of the same approach can be seen in games like A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, a pair of classic games that saw the series develop further. You had storylines and characters that had really had a bigger role. With the advancement in tech, Nintendo were able to come a lot closer to the original art. Colourful, detailed worlds with a real emphasis on the setting in the world. Instead of these barren landscapes, these games had people who lived there. You start to really build up a history of Hyrule, especially seen in Terada's medieval inspiration with his artwork for both A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. The transition from functional gameplay driven elements to a real emphasis on story kind of really flows into this early Zelda 90s art style. Towards the end of the 90s came a shift from 2D Zelda to 3D Zelda, and how could Nintendo really capture the magic of Zelda in this brand new space? Early beta concepts of Ocarina of Time seemed to take a 3D version of Link to the Past in design and direction, and it felt a little bit clunky, especially with beta enemies that seemed to really be kind of an attempt at converting SNES sprites into just 3D models. The game progressed and really established its own unique art style, together with its sequel Majora's Mask. These games were heavily drawn from their concept art and feel, a gritty, anime-inspired look, more mature in tone, but still maintaining the whimsical nature of a Zelda game. The style was drawn from a sense of becoming older, Miyamoto recalling how those who had played Link to the Past as children were now becoming adults when Ocarina of Time was released. This visual direction, whether it's character design or the world itself, really helped tell the tale of the Hero of Time. And with the success of Zelda on the Nintendo 64, fans had been craving a successor on the GameCube. I can remember watching a small 240p video on IGN back in 2000 where Nintendo teased a concept for a GameCube Zelda, a 2-minute sequence of Link and Ganondorf going toe to toe. Then at E3 popped Nintendo's most radical shift in Zelda to date. You had Ocarina of Time in the Space World demo, and then you had a shift to the vibrant, bright and colourful style of Wind Waker, and it divided so many fans. I can even remember falling out with a friend, a fellow Zelda fan, because they really wanted this mature and gritty Zelda, and they didn't quite gel with with Wind Waker. And one of the things Nintendo does best is really have a purpose for a particular graphical style, especially with the shift to a cel-shaded approach in the Wind Waker. This lighter tone works so well with the C setting and also allowed Nintendo to really make Link far more expressive. And what's interesting is how the game really evolved from Ocarina of Time, where Nintendo had to highlight particular features in all the characters to make them sit and fit in this world. You had exaggerated facial features and proportions that made this world of Wind Waker feel gorgeously stylized and super expressive. And when you look back at early design sketches, you can see Nintendo's decision to make the characters oversized, so you had a more look that started off kind of like A Link to the Past, and eventually became more chibi in nature. The style continued with Spirit Tracks, Phantom Hourglass and Minish Cap, and hopefully Nintendo will continue the Toon Link style in a future game because Toon Link is awesome. GameCube owners and fresh Wii adopters were then treated something dramatically different. Twilight Princess, it's a monumental shift back to that gritty Ocarina of Time, and perhaps a little bit more fantasy in design as well. Characters have intricate details, the game has a more serious narrative, and this really flows into the art direction. Even classic baddies from Ocarina of Time look creepy and warped in design. So you may be wondering, why did Nintendo go from something as bright and vibrant as Wind Waker to something a little bit more dark and gritty like Twilight Princess? The answer comes down to, unfortunately, due to sales, Nintendo had planned Wind Waker 2, but ultimately to sort of satisfy the American market came up with Twilight Princess. With the Lord of the Rings films proving super popular, Nintendo really focused on horse riding as a core mechanic for Twilight Princess, and that sense of realism bled into the game's overall direction. Producer Eiji Aonuma recalls asking Miyamoto for advice, who told him, "If you really want to make a realistic Zelda, you should start by doing what you couldn't do in Ocarina of Time. Make it so that Link can attack enemies whilst riding on his horse using the Wind Waker engine, and make your direction based on how that feels." From darkness to light, as Nintendo moved on to a more lighter and exaggerated style in Skyward Sword, a game that seemed to blend elements from Wind Waker and also those kind of twisted and dark elements from Twilight Princess. The main draw for a shift back to a more whimsical feel was due to Nintendo wanting to explore a painting come to life look, with the controls heavily focused on weapons and swordplay. Nintendo wanted enemies to have this exaggerated style so players can be able to battle easier. And finally we move on to the epic Breath of the Wild, a massive change in direction for Nintendo, with Link exploring a huge open world on Wii U and Switch. Art director Satoru Takizawa discussed the trial and error approach in the Creating a Champion book. Nintendo ended up brewing a style that combined the realistic, sprawling overworld with more fantasy elements. It's a hybrid of styles that really sat well within the gameplay. Takizawa said, "We wanted to create a world that could accommodate the fantastical elements of Hyrule without sacrificing a more realistic art style. And we went about that by crafting a hybrid of the two that would allow players to suspend their disbelief when certain things happen." He noted if Nintendo went super photorealistic, things like cutting trees that instantly turn into firewood just wouldn't work. So a combined approach, drawing elements from Wind Waker, Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess, really fits this brand new world that Nintendo are exploring. It feels like Breath of the Wild is the culmination of many incredible styles of gameplay and art that Nintendo have been brewing up for over 3 decades. It has elements of Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, Ocarina, Twilight Princess, and it will be absolutely incredible to see where Zelda goes in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So I hope you enjoyed our little trip back through time exploring classic Zelda art styles. Let us know what your favourite art direction in Zelda is with a comment below. And if you are a huge fan of Zelda, which I'm sure you are, check out our exclusive fan merch. Links are in the description below. We've got shirts and prints celebrating the Legend of Zelda. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more Zelda, Nintendo, Pokemon videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And a big thank you for coming on this Zelda adventure with us. We'll hope to see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching and all your support. Bye bye.